Now on tape 1 and tape 2, we took some excerpts from our subscriber series of tapes, building an I-beam Spitfire, covering the ring, bringing the surface up to silver, and we're at the point where we're going to be going through the colored dope, masking off the trim, and possibly on up into the clear, the detailing, within the next couple of tapes. This is tape 3 in that set, and we hope you pick up some good information from this set of tapes on using the material. If you have any questions, need answered, first thing to do is try to call me, email me, windyu@aol.com, or drop me a note and I'll answer it the same day. Now once you have your model up to the point where everything is silver, and assuming that that's the method you're going to use, of course there's other methods. You can use Brodak primer. We've used Brodak primer in spots. And by the way, any details of finishing the silver, the fuselage, doing repairs, we have that all on our dedicated set of tapes for building the I-beamer. These are some of the color choices, and of course these would be the base coats. If you, say for instance, wanted to make a little bit different color yellow, you can mix some of the yellows. And just let me skip over this because there's enough color choices here almost for every model you would want. But in some cases, like the one we're going to be doing, we want some very special, specific colors. We're going to be matching to photographs to keep the model prototypical. But John has provided a selection of colors that really is probably the best in the industry, and we're going to try to use as many of them right out of the can as we can. Now we try to do these videos in a methodical way so that they can be as helpful as possible. We try not to get into too many fancy things that wouldn't be applicable to an average modeler. And if you have any comments on the tapes or things you'd like to see on tape that we haven't done yet, please just drop me a line and I'll try to accommodate you. A basic premise of what we're going to try to do is, and I'm going to use a normal type of trim here, is to paint the trim on the plane first. This of course would be a wing panel. And if you can get a really good idea of what I'm going to try to do, even though this is a very complex multicolored paint job that I'm going to be doing, an oversimplification here would be, I always like to paint the trim first. Now when I've painted the trim, what it means is all I need to do is back mask the trim, and I can come in, and no matter whether it's camouflage or whether it's yellow or white, but it's a technique that I've used, and I have on many, many other videos. I've used it pretty much all my life, of never going over or only going over in as few places as it's possible, so that there's no place now by doing this, there's no place that I have double paint. If I were to do this the opposite way, of painting the whole this surface pink and then painting the blue, the problem is I have twice as much blue on here, and then one level is twice as high as the other, and I need to fill that mountaintop with clear. In every possible way you lose when you multi-paint one on top of the other, because the pigmented paint is the heaviest of all the paint. And Brodak paint has an exceptional amount of pigment in it. It's of course a proprietary information how much it is, but trust me, it's a lot. And it covers very well. All the colors cover very well. So if you're going over a silver base and you can do one color and the other one, in theory, the clear will be nice and level right at that spot, and you'll get a nice trim line. Technique, and I'm going to give Steve Busso the full credit for this. It might not be his invention, but he was the first one I ever knew that used it. Steve used to take the plans and shrink them down in a copier so he'd have an exact side view, wing profile, and a side view, a top view of the tail. And then what he'd do is make these little, I call them sketch pads. So you could decide now, you could sit with maybe colored pencils would be a good choice, and we've done this many times on video. In fact, a good dissertation on planning a paint job, number one from the All and Nat's Final Appearance Judging. That's one of John Brodak's tapes that he sells, and that has excellent ideas. See, a lot of people just don't have an idea for a paint job. Now, in our case, a Spitfire is a pretty, well, there's so many different kinds of Spitfires, models, variations, and Air Forces that had them. We really have a lot of things to pick and choose from. But one of the nice things here is, if you're doing, let's say, a Brodak Cardinal, and you want to come up with some original looking paint job, you're not sure how it's going to look when it's finished. or whether those colors are going to go well together. One of the things you can do is get some colored pencils, lay it out just the way I'm doing here, and make some kind of an idea up in your head, and you say, oh, gee, I'm glad I didn't do that. It looks like a peppermint patty. Whoop. Well, a lot of times you can just go back and change it right on the paper. And you can make, before you color them in, you can make up a bunch of Xerox copies. So what happens in my mind's eye, I already have a pretty good idea of what I want the paint job to look like on a Spitfire, although I do change my mind kind of quickly. I'm glad I'm not, doing brain surgery or something where it would be a problem. But anyway, if you make these little sketches, a lot of times you can do this well before it's time to paint, and you can come up with an idea that'll suit your needs, and you'll say, gee whiz, I really like the way that looks, I like the way that looks, I like the way that... Come up with these little sketches, and once you're really finalized in doing it, the next step, and we've already done this for the Spitfire on the other videos, is you want to look at it and say, well, what do I want to paint this area first? And picture in your mind. Now, okay, it means you're going to mask this off. You could picture this in your mind. Mask this off. In our case, we used a real prey method using tinfoil, and that would mean you could paint this, paint this. Okay, now you're done. You peel off the masking tape, and then all you have to do now is back mask this whole piece, and you can back mask over this color with it. Just put a piece of foil, and now you can spray all these. See, you have to kind of figure each plane out individually. Then the last thing you do is take all the tape off. You put one big sheet of tin foil here, one big sheet of tin foil here, and spray this. Okay, so if you have a little idea, that's the figuring out of how you're going to do a paint job is a critical part of it. Now, in our case, we're going to try to do it in as few steps as possible, but we have other constraints. The other constraints are we want to do, if we're going to do like the invasion stripes, it's practical to just paint the whole block white and then paint the black stripes in. This is just, when you're painting black over white, there's almost no weight gain. But you would never want to do that in the reverse, is paint the dark color. In this case, you would want to paint the whole plane blue and then try to paint pink on top of blue. Forget it. The one thing you never want to do, keep this in mind, you never want to paint anything red and then try to paint white on top of it. Red is a color that'll bleed through for about 90 coats. So by figuring this out, what you've done is you maximize the fact that the Brodak dope has a very, very high amount of pigment, which will save you weight. You'll get excellent coverage, and by not having one color over another color, or by laying this out, you have the ultimate weight gain, the ultimate saving in weight, where the gain on a normal paint job would be 7 or 8 coats, one on top of the other. You should have one coat on everything, and then the minimum amount of clear to seal it and to blend it so that you don't even feel when you rub your finger over the paint. Little areas, they won't even feel like, it'll feel like it's all painted with one coat. So those are the little theories of what we're going to try to do, and of course we're going to be doing it on an actual plane that's in the shop right now. I want to show a couple of things that might be worth thinking about if you're planning a paint job. Let's say you wanted to replicate Dondi's paint job, something similar to this. What I just spoke about, really important. You'd want to paint the white first, paint over where the blue is even. Then you could come back in, paint the red, or you could paint the blue striping in there. And then the last thing, do the red. Never put the red underneath anything. The red bleeds through like it's crazy. Well, that's just a good example of a very nice paint job that if you were to paint the whole plane white and then go over with the red, you'd probably pick up a 1/2 to 3/4 of an ounce. 80% of it would be behind the CG, and in effect what you're going to wind up with is an extra little bit of nose weight that you need. And in a world where people are going crazy trying to get nose weights out of planes and make the planes lighter, to add that extra weight, totally unnecessary. So that's just one good thought. There are a few exceptions I've done, and I don't do it all the time, but in a case where I'm going to paint black over white, I would usually paint this whole bar white. And I don't know it's even worth doing it, because then when I go to spray the black, it takes such a little bit. It probably doesn't even take a spoonful of black. But if you were to reverse this and want to paint the black first and put white trim on top of black, you just add an inordinate amount of paint. Same thing with yellow. You'd like to always have yellow go over silver or over white. You'd never want to paint this camo first and then paint the yellow. By the time you did, the yellow would have way too many coats. Just adds unnecessary weight. So planning out this paint job is part of what you have to do to maximize the efficiency of Brodak dope. This is one of the things I learned long ago. In this case, what I wanted to do, this was in the years before I really figured out every little piece of this, is I left a little silver stripe between the two colors. So what I did, I ran that thin tape, and this is a good idea on a traditional plane, leave that silver stripe. Now when you back mask, in other words, the first step would be to mask everything that's red and paint the white. Now when you pull the tape off, you leave that silver stripe, mask off the white and the silver, and when you're done spraying the red and you pull it off, you'll have what amounts to be this thin, little tiny silver stripe, 1/8" stripe between all the coloration. And it adds a nice little accent touch. And it's not that it's even no more work, it's less work than if you had to go touch that. And the only problem is where the two paints come together, there'll be a little ditch where that is. And you need to fill it in with a couple of coats of clear if that's one of your choices. You're only going to do little bits and pieces of trim like this blue or red or whatever, and basically the whole plane is going to be white, then maybe the most reasonable thing is just to paint the whole plane white. But now just think of another thing, and this is really an important thing. If you do that, one of the things you have to do is you have to back mask the whole plane in white. And the white is delicate. If you get any overspray, you have to clean it off. But how much better it would be if you just paint this little red, blue, paint these little trim areas and mask them off. Now you paint the whole plane white. You've used 1/10 of the amount of masking tape and tin foil, and the plane will probably come out a lot nicer. So these are important things to think about. Another thought, when you're at this point in planning a normal paint job, one of the things, if you'd like to go for the absolute lightest weight at any price, well, one of the nice things Dave Fitzgerald's done is show how really nice that can be. He left the outer panels just in clear in tinted tissue. Ply span comes in colors, or you can dye your own tissue. And that really is nice. A nice way. That probably overall saves maybe 1 ounce in colored paint. Now, when you think about planning this out, what this would mean is when you go to paint the plane, you can mask these panels off, and you're basically done until it's time to shoot all the final clear over the colors. This is really a good way. If you know you're building a plane and it's a little bit on the heavy side, this is a very good idea. If you know a plane is heavy, it's a good idea to use as many dark colors as possible. Black is a good choice. When you know a plane is coming out overweight, dark colors. Try to stay away from whites and yellows. Again, you just look at the variation in different ways and think of what's the best way to do each one of these paint jobs. And you want to do this, you want to make all these decisions before you actually go down to the shop and start painting. That's the whole key. Final trick, you can make this work for you like a jewel. You can paint, in this case, the blue was painted white. This whole area of trim was painted white. And then 1/8" tape was laid out along the edge. Okay, and then the light blue was painted. Then this whole thing was back masked up, right up and over that last 1/8" of trim. Now think of how nice this is. The only back masking on the whole plane is this piece, this little piece around the canopy, and the lettering, which this is just ordinary tape with lettering, maybe these little stripes, and you spray the whole plane blue. So this was one of my first challenges, was trying to figure this out, and believe it or not, this is the first plane I remember really thinking about ahead of time how I was going to do this. And Harold was all impressed. We did this in Harold Price's garage. He was all impressed that I had figured this out. So think about it ahead of time. Try to do a little schematic of you're going to do this first, that, and however you do it, it'll save you time, it'll save you weight, it'll save you the color, it'll actually save you the material itself. Now I have a little time today. One of the things I want to do even though we don't have the canopy on the plane yet, I haven't done the cockpit details, I can piece it all together, and I want to cut out some of the patterns with colored paper that are going to be my patterns for the roundels, for the stripes. I can do a little bit of that layout today while I have some time. And the first thing to do is go down to an art supply store or like a Kmart and just get some colored paper, scissors, a compass, and a ruler. Colored paper allows me to develop a trim pattern, or in this case we're going to start with the roundels. That's the easiest thing. All you need is a compass. But I can make them bigger, smaller, change colors. I don't really need to have the colors that I'm going to use, but I can make a complete set of what I'll call trim colors and move them around, move them forward, back. In this case, if it was a traditional stunner and it had different trim shapes, I could lay them out, move them around. Making the patterns is usually, once you have the concept drawing or a picture in your mind, making the patterns is usually the first step toward having a really nice trim job. This part of the job for us easy is we have so much documentation. And you can see some of the variations of the roundels, big ones, small ones. When you're doing a semi, you look at the ones on the top, how large they are. You have a lot of choices. So if you either have, in the case of a traditional stunner, a concept drawing, a semi-scale, a book to work with, this will just give you some rough idea that you can look at the model, look at the real airplane, and kind of get in focus, get a picture in your mind of what you want to have. The original Spitfire and Seafire projects, we have this tool. It's really a compass. And you can buy this in any drafting store if you were going to do roundels. Believe it or not, roundels are difficult to do. Or you can pick up a set of Seafire plans that has the roundels already laid out in full scale. But because this is a blade tip, what this allows me to do is cut various circles. That word relatively is a word that goes a long way here. Just to get some rough idea as to what size and shape I'd like these to. Look at this, not too good. I'm pressing too hard. I'm trying to be too cute here. You need to press ever so slightly, and you can wind up with a reasonable. I ran out of blue paper cutting circles. But now what this allows me to do, I can go over to the Spitfires of the previous to this, and I can measure how far up, down. I can put these further out, further forward, further back. I can also downsize them or upsize them accordingly. And again, I can look at it from a lot of different angles until I decide exactly how I want to do this, how I want to lay these out. But this can then, and I don't have to have the exact colors, this can be any color, but this gives me a real good idea of what this will look like in full scale. The next step was to make up a little pattern, roughly, of the invasion stripes. Now in this case, what I want to do, I want to have each invasion stripe end at a rib, so I had to narrow down from the original ones. The original ones were a little over 2 inches wide. These I'll make 2 inches, and I want them to start at a rib and stop at a rib. I don't want to have a trim line right in the middle of a base. So this is one of the things that by laying this out ahead of time in paper, and I could obviously add a little bit and make it that it would come to the next rib or whatever. But this, for our purposes right now, this allows me to look at it in full scale. Another thing it allows me to have this all put together. Do I like it better if it's right up against the body? Do I like it better if it's out one rib? I have a lot of choices here now as to what I can do. Next part of this, and the reason I like to have this paper made, is I'd like to use, if possible, the same width of stripe for the fuselage stripes. And you can see that pretty much is close anyway. Now that I know I'm going to be within this range, and these are 2-inch stripes, now I know I can make up the patterns for the letters. And what I try to do, and I don't know that there's a better way, maybe there is I try to make, since I need 3 letters and a roundel, a letter, 2 stripes for the roundel, and a letter. Then when I transpose it, of course, the roundel is further down the fuselage. So now I know that I have a 2-inch bar to work in, a 2-inch bar, and I can cut out my letters, and I also can measure this area and replicate that roundel. So by having a pattern, now if this didn't fit, I'd have to make up a whole nother pattern. But I can kind of look at that from a side view, and I can look at the models that are already made and go right through this. Now, no matter what I was doing, if I was putting zigzag stripes, arrowheads, or traditional paintwork with checkerboards, it's just so easy to lay it out in paper and change it, rather than mask it all off and you put it on and then all of a sudden, oh, God, that looks terrible. Well, if you want to make them a little thinner, scissor it right up and you're done. And you can get a look at, how did it look a little thinner, a little thicker, or whatever. So this gives me a nice option. It takes about 10 minutes to make and maybe 10 cents worth of paper. And I can move these around. I can get a real good feel for. And because I'm trying to make it as scale as possible, I can refer to the book, go back to the book. I have a lot of choices, and it's a good way to lay out a trim job before you actually start laying tape down. Now I try to look at some of the prototypical lettering so I can get a feel for what the style or the look of this. Most of the British squadrons have similar, but again, they're not all exactly the same. So I try to get a feel for, and some of the letters, now we're going to name this particular lettering job. We have the letters GMA, and it's kind of a little tribute to George Aldrich. I'm sure he'll enjoy seeing that, so he's been a big help. We want to give him a little bit of credit here. Not much, just a little. But anyway, so I try to replicate this off the way the letters are and make them as scale as possible. Again, this is the part of it where there's a lot of give and take, and you wind up cutting up 10 sheets of paper before you get it. But by having the letters all laid out, I'll have a little bit of a look at what this will look like in full scale. Get an idea of if I want to make them a little bigger, a little smaller. And I want to lay out the roundel. The roundel is going to comprise 2 of these squares, 2 of these stripes. So it gives me a very predictable, I don't have to worry about this ending half in the... I'm trying to do it, and maybe this is not exactly prototypical, because when they put the invasion stripes on, remember, all invasion stripes were put on in one night. Every plane in the invasion was done in one evening, and they did them all at night with a brush. So you don't really see these kind of exact lines. But anyway, beside the point, we want to make this as nice as possible. I'll cut the rest of the letter out on the little roundel, and I want it to match this roundel. This is the early model Spitz. And then we'll be able to lay the whole thing out pretty much and get an idea what this is going to look like, except for the camouflage job. Now I have at least the part that's going to be on the fuselage side, the roundels, the invasion stripes, and I want to cut that little piece out. There's always a red, white, and blue bar on British airplanes. At least if nothing else, even if I don't get to mask anything off today, I'll just have all these patterns ready in my arsenal to go to the day that I'm going to do the masking. And again, another trick, you never want to mask off a plane the day before, because the tape stays on for some amount of time. You want to get the tape on, paint it, and get the tape off as soon as possible. And usually with lacquer or with dope, you want to leave it on for 24 hours to get that nice edge, but you don't want to leave it on for 6 weeks either. Even something as small as this little bar on the rudder, on the fin, there's 2 different ways. I know obviously there's more than one fin, but this is the early model. And we need to lay this out in red, white, and blue. I don't have any more blue paper, so I'm just using a black. Boy, having the books, so handy. Now, of course, when I reverse this to the other side, I'll just change, these are equal, and the white stripe in the middle is a constant, so I can just flip this. Now, this is one of the things I wanted to lay out and see if I would really have a way of fitting this into the plan here, and I don't know that I will, of course. Some people think only P-40s had that tiger mouth. Obviously, many other ones have had it. B-25s have had it. Now, doing this, the first thing is to cut up a paper pattern, and Make a whole bunch of them, bigger, smaller, meaner, uglier, till you find one that you really like. Now I don't know, this is just a paper pattern I sketched out to get an idea of if I'm going to like this or in which direction this is going to go. So you really have to look at this from a lot of angles and see if this is what the look that I want. And believe me, that'll be a job to mask off. I need to think about exactly how I want to do this. Now I don't have the exhaust manifolds on yet, so I need to lay that out so I don't wind up having to put a manifold right in the middle of the teeth. But anyway, that's about all I'm going to get time to do today, and I wanted to just lay this out in my mind, get an idea of, well, we're going to probably, unless the Canopy arrives tomorrow, we're going to start working on this. See, it's always possible to do all the trim on a plane before you do the final details, because then in the end all I'll have to do is backmask the mouth, the roundels and the stripes, and shoot all the camo in one day. Anyway, this will give me something to think about tonight. You may think we really didn't get a lot done today. Well, yeah, just getting this firm in our mind and being able to lay it out in several ways. Tomorrow we'll start, and if the Canopy's here, we'll work on the Canopy. If not, we'll start backmasking our trim. Now before I lay out any of the tape, I'll always do the bottom first if possible. I always take a little bit of that 3M sanding sponge and just clean off any dust. Some M600, clean up the area real well, because this will be the last time we get to wipe this down. And I want to lay out those little patterns that I made yesterday. I've been looking at this over and over and over again and moving the tape around and changing it and making it thinner and making the eye a different shape. So I really want to get this before I go on to finishing up the roundels. The beauty of doing it with paper patterns, I've changed this contour, try to make that droop back a little bit and change the shape of the eye about 14 times already. But that's the beauty of having these little paper patterns. And once it's right, it's right. Beauty of just having these roundels all cut out like little donuts. You can move them around. If for some reason when you're all done you don't like the look, or you want to make them thinner, or you want to use a different shape or whatever, this is just such a handy way to work on a trim job. To show you how important it is to have somebody spell check your work. Now I'm doing this and I'm looking at the eye and I'm getting this angle right and I'm fooling around from it. And I came up with this, and I've changed this pattern so many times his teeth are disappearing already. And Karen comes down and she looks at it, she says, hey, cool, except for one problem. You get the tongue on the wrong side of the mouth. So you can see here the tongue is on the bottom, and here in my haste. So it's always good in these kind of things to have as many people look at it and critique it as possible. It's easy to make these kind of mistakes, and boy, I'll tell you, you can bet the guys at the Nats would say, you know, like when Bill Rich spelled tractor, he put tactor stunt. But anyway, one of the things, when you you finalize the design, what I do is I cut these little holes in it, and this allows me to put tape, and these aren't really critical, just little holes. I've got the roundels about where I want them now. And then I can paste this on here, and I can run this on the other side and make a mirror image. But having these little cutouts, and I'll do it to the roundels now that I know I'm pretty happy with where they're going to be. What I want to do is go around the perimeter, just put in little holes where I can put the tape. In the case of the roundels, it doesn't matter. You can just use them both ways. They're mirror images. They're the same no matter which way you do it. But in the case of trim, if you had a zig or something and you wanted to reverse it, you take the tape off and put it on the other side. Again, the first thing of everything, though, is so important, is to get these things exactly where you want them, because obviously once you lay the tape down, you don't want to have to go back, or even worse, once you put the paint on and you take it off and go, if I only put that stripe a little closer to the leading edge. Now those little holes allow me to just put this permanently in position and use this for a pattern, or whichever one of the circles, to mask out. And in this case, what I want to do is mask up everything today that's going to be painted white. So what I'm going to do is the invasion stripes, the part of the roundel that's red and white, because white makes a good background for the red, and the whole area that's going to be the shark mouth, and the invasion stripes, that whole thing can be painted white at once. So the trick is now is get everything permanent, and then I'll tinfoil it off and try to get, maybe I'm not even going to get it done in one session, but get as much of this masked out, back masked, and get all the white painted in one day if I can. The tool, like Joe Adamusco bought me this, you can buy these in Staples. It allows me to, with one hand I can hold a pattern, and with the other hand I can be tearing off little pieces of tape like this, because I'm going to need a lot of these. Very handy. You can use it when you use the thin line tape, any tape. It just makes nice, any length pieces you need. You can get these all cut ahead of time in preparation for backmasking. I have the final spot that I want this to be. What I want to do in this case, I want 1, 2, 3. I make little notations as to how many inches. This is the 4th rib. And right here I have a mark for trailing edge. And what that allows me to do is when I go and reverse this to the top, hopefully have them even. Nothing worse than having them when you look from the top or the bottom. And I need enough room in the front to get that yellow leading edge. I have plenty of room from the invasion stripe, and it accents the pointy tips, which is one of the things I want to do. What I always try to do too is put a clean flannel shirt on every day that I'm working on this. I don't want to have a shirt that's, you know, like got oil or grease or anything on it. A clean shirt. And the flannel, I always try to rub the tape at least once on the flannel shirt, and this guarantees it's not going to pull up the paint. And always use a little memento, a note about tapes. You always leave a bunch of little pieces so when I get in a position that I can't reach for the thing, I can just use this tape. But it takes the extra little stickiness, and you really don't need that extra stickiness, believe me. Now this is just to hold this in position. And what I'm going to do is lay the next ring in and then mask out from the second ring. This is just to hold it in position temporarily. So I don't want to have tape going on and off, on and off. Having the tape stuck to a flannel shirt and taken off, it'll still have enough stickiness, and yet you're not going to pull up the paint or get the glue laying all over this by the time you're done. I'm using this to line up this, and then I'll use this to do the masking. And it's kind of a labor-intensive thing here, but I really want to get these accurate. And believe me, if they're not accurate in the plane, you look at it from some angles, and it's really going to look, well, most people would never even notice this stuff, but I like to have it as accurate as I can. Now, what I really need to do now, this locates this, which locates this. Once I get this piece permanently in here, then I can take all this off and mask around it, and this will be the white area. So to try to kind of plan it, you spray all the white in one shot. If possible, it's a real nice way to do it instead of changing the paint in the gun back and forth 1,000 times, especially white, because white is, if there's any other red in the gun or anything, whatever, you wind up with something that isn't pure white. You really want to have accurately in position. I was introduced to the world of roundels 4 or 5 years ago thinking, oh, no problem, it's a bunch of circles. It is the most difficult thing in the whole world to mask these off. And if they're off even just a little bit, because your eye has a reference line for every diameter. Yeah, it's actually a lot easier to do stars or some eccentric shape. Okay, now what that does, that allows me to take this piece out, and you can see it holds it in just enough. And now I can use fine line tape, the thin 1/8 inch tape, and that's in exactly the right position now. A couple of things that may be a good tip. You see how I started this tape? I never even pushed it down. Now I don't push this up on my flannel shirt because this is going to be a tape edge. So what I want to do, I want to find, and this is difficult to go over the I-beam, I want to find a spot where the tape will be relatively hard here, once I have the curve, and now I always use two hands, and I don't even know how to describe how to do this other than do a little practice. One hand holds the tape up, one hand you kind of walk the edge of the pattern, keep pulling it back if you go too far. This is probably the most, I don't know, skill level, high skill level, whatever, but getting these nice edges. Now in the past, one of the problems would be when you had to add a lot of extra pigment to the paint, you'd get these tape edges that be 1/4 of an inch high, and you have to worry about knocking them down. With Brodak dope, that's not necessary. The pigment's in there. You know, like that commercial that says it's in there. And I always want to overlap this about 1/8 of an inch. That is our white area, and that's ready for backmasking. Okay, all the roundels are done. The mouth finally, after 2,000 times, hopefully got that the way we wanted, the outline of the white. And again, if these areas were a different color, I might consider blocking off the black, but for right now, we just paint the whole thing white. It'll save some time backmasking too. And obviously what I want to do, I want to see that I have, and I've looked at the books to see if these, in a scale plane, they come out just a little bit. They don't actually go right up to the fillet. So what I'm going to do is pick it up on right on that first rib. And that's what's nice about having this trim, that I can just move it out, see if I wanted to see. Now Joe Adamusco put his stripes, of course he's making a Reno Air Race, so he put them way out here. Well, or if I can make them a little thinner, a little thicker. The object was I wanted to have all of the striped edges come right up even, roughly even with a rib. I didn't want to have that edge in the middle of the tissue, so I'll try to pick up a rib I'll try to line that right up with that. Since these are 2 inches apart, this should, you would think in theory anyway. Anyway, we're going to lay that out, and that'll be the next step on getting this all backmasked. Okay, we've got both of the outlines for the invasion stripes. I'm trying to do the bottom first to make any adjustments or over taping I need to. And I'll be ready to flip this over and tape off the top of the invasion stripes. At this point, because I want to work on the fuselage next, I can get the flaps. I've cut the tape. I can get the flaps off of here. That's one of the nice things about having these parts removable. And now I can check that the tape lines up front to back. And of course I have to put a little patch in there, a little piece. And make sure at the trailing edge I've got everything lined up. This will give me more room to work in here, and this is all the area that will get painted white eventually. One of the objects is I want to make sure I have these at a 90 degree to the thrust line. Now I can usually use a reference, a good reference is off the bottom of the step and elevator. We'll see if I'm close. Okay, the last little piece here that I'm masking out is this little pattern. Now I put the little dots on the tape because all I want to mask out here is the white stripe. I could get that way out of the way too. In fact, we can get rid of this right now. So that's what's nice about these take-apart pieces. This is a rather traditional no matter what kind of trim you have on a plane, having these basic little techniques I think will help. Well, we're almost ready for the back mask. And see now you just take this piece out of here. I can just trim these little tails. Now I'm going to leave these pieces on so I can get the mirror image on the other side. So they line up. Again, these are the little things that if they don't line up. Okay, and this will line me up for the other side. We're almost ready to start the backmasking. This one pretty smoothly. The time I ever saw tinfoil used for backmasking, Walt Frey had turned me on to it, and I've used it ever since. And it's an excellent way to do real quick backmasking. Now I want this little area exposed. So I can lay this piece right on here, and just by rubbing my finger on here, you can see the impression it leaves. It leaves an exact impression of where you need to cut the foil away. Now I'll go over to the newspaper. It's best to cut this on newspaper and just cut this out. I can put the tape around. It'll give me, in one shot, I have all the backmasking for this piece done. You can see the exact impression. And the object of this is, if you're real careful, and you don't have to be real careful, but if you are, you can cut the dimension of the 1/8" tape away, and the masking tape that you put on won't even touch the paint. It'll just touch exactly where you want this to be backmasked. So you can see exactly how the tape laid that little deal out. Now when I hold this up and I run the tape on here, none of it will actually be touching the plane. It'll only be going on the 1/8" outline tape. You see how nice that does it all in one piece. And this is the whole idea of doing the trim first. Otherwise you've got to backmask the whole plane. Gives us a little chance to do them both in one shot if we want to. What I can do is lay up this edge. Probably just make it too. Wow. Another thing too, you can get the cheapest tinfoil going. You do not have to buy good tinfoil. And this will give me the outline of the roundel here. Again, it takes just a little pressure. You have the outline, and I can tape that all in one piece.
So sweet a happy lives upon your heart. He was a small lad, this man played his horse and an outlaw. They spoke to folks around.
That is really by putting in just small pieces right off of that little tool, that little tape dispenser. You don't even have to bend the tape and everything lays down. Now I can just press this right around. I can tape up the other edge. And I've got one whole panel done in a minute or so. Now once you get into this, you can always figure little shortcuts, little ways of making it go faster. For instance, when we do this top, I'll try to get most of this top in one piece on the bottom, one piece on the bottom here. You can kind of, like a puzzle, you can kind of lay out pretty much where you want to get the various pieces of this put into place. And I want to leave, obviously, this piece exposed, so I can pretty much figure I've got 6 or 8 more pieces here, and I should have most of it masked off. But it just gets redundant after a while. Okay, the next step is to get a little thin mix of Brodak dope and a little tiny brush and go around all the edges, seal the edges with one thin coat of clear Brodak, and we'll be ready to mix up some white paint, get this shot today.
The shadows sway and seem.
Now if I mix this up roughly 50-50 is a good starting point, maybe a little extra thinner. I want to press the tape down. See, the idea is to get the tape on, get it sealed, get it painted, and get it off. Don't leave it on more than the 24 hours you need. So if we get the white painted today, tomorrow we can pull off all the tape, and we should, in theory, get some nice, crisp, clean lines. This just seals the edge, especially on circles and curves. Straight lines don't seem to be as prone to pick up the little corners of the tape. Again, one of the things that makes this real nice is the fact that Brodak dope dries so quickly. Usually 20 minutes later, you're done. Once these little edges dry, obviously we're going to get out and This is why you always want to use fresh tape too, not last year's leftover tape that's all dried out. Now one thing nice about all the Brodak colors, they all have the right amount of pigment in them. They all cover very well. Especially some of the ones that are usually difficult, the yellows, the reds, the whites. These are excellent. To take the parts that I can handle, small parts, do these first before I even try to do the main frame. If I have little parts, I want to spray one of these because it's pouring rain out there right now. And I want to let it dry a half an hour. If at the end of a half hour it hasn't fogged over, I'll go ahead and paint the main frame. But the problem is, if I have to add retarder, I want to add it on a small part. I don't want to add it unless I have to. Okay, there's the first coat. It's covered in one coat. When you go white over silver, it's a one coat deal. I'm going to let this dry. I want to see if it's going to fog over. And if not, I can go right with the mix I have now, which is basically 50-50. Brodak thinner and Brodak white. You see what we have to deal with here. It's pouring. And my little test didn't fog up, but hey, you never know. Give it a good half an hour, and you should know for sure. We're going to see how this dries up. It's been sitting there for about a half an hour, no fog yet. We'll come down and look at it tomorrow morning and see how it's should be real nice. Okay, this has been drying up by a heating vent for I guess about 20 hours. I always feel like it should either dry overnight or 24 hours when you're doing any kind of dope. Now I'm going to try very carefully to I'll take off the foil and very, very carefully take off the tape by peeling it back very slow. Try to break the edge nice and clean. See how clean I can get the tape to release. I never like to leave the tape on any longer than I have to, obviously, that's one thing. But certainly if you take it off too soon, one of the things you can run into, one of the problems, is you won't get a nice edge. The edge will be all fuzzy, so. With all the tin foil off the plane, one of the things I've decided to do, I'm going to leave some of the 1/8" tape, the outline around the mouth area, because I'm going to back mask that. The next color I want to do is the red. So what I try to do is mask off now all the areas on the airplane that would normally be red. And then once I change the paint in the gun, I really have to only go through this once. What's good I like to do too is in between. Now obviously you could leave some of the tin foil on the plane and save some of this, pulling all the foil off and putting it back on. In this case there's not a lot of red, so I'm just going to go back and mask it off. But one of the things I want to do is take the edge of a credit card, this is usually the best medium, and shave the edge of the paint. And this kills the edge. You'll notice when you use Brodak dope, the edging, it comes out really nice. If you do use one coat of clear, that'll usually do it. You usually have just almost an imperceptible edge there. Even though this is white, white is probably the color that's most difficult to get covered in one coat. Over silver, with the extra pigment that's already in the material, it really goes very well. This edge on because what I'm going to do is use that edge over again as I do the back masking in here. Although probably even if I wanted to, I probably could take this off and just remask it again. But for purposes right now, when I mask the teeth off, I can leave that on as an edge. And I'll just have to run that tape right down the middle. Again, I'm trying to plan this out as I go. Now, especially on silk span, I want to really be delicate. It's best to just hit it at a 45-degree angle if possible. Very delicately. The one thing you don't want to do is use sandpaper. Sandpaper will muddle that all up. You might want to, if you get a lot of little chips coming off for whatever reason, it might be appropriate to wipe the whole area with M600. But now, because we have the patterns, I want to lay out that inner circle in red, where the red will be. And what this does, now of course every paint job is going to be different. All this does is locate my red part of the roundel. And this is why I like to have all these little pieces cut out. Now once I place this piece on, I need to get a little piece of tape the same way. And then I can decide exactly if I want to use the 1/8 inch tape or if the choices are many. You can use fine line tape, and I'll try each way to see which way is going to work the best on this. As circles get smaller and smaller, it's more and more difficult, or corners or edges, to bend that tape. So you always want to experiment, and in the worst case, you can lay out all the tape on a piece of glass and trace this out and just lay that pattern right on there. Now, it's always good to try both ways. One way, by the way, that works real well, we may even resort to it yet, is to take ordinary masking tape, lay it on a piece of glass, and you can trim it even thinner then, use a brand new XL blade. You can trim it even thinner than 1/8 inch. In this case, we may have to. I want to lay one of these out and see if I get a nice edge. You'll find once you start practicing with 1/8 inch tape like this, takes a little bit of like a hand-eye coordination, but you'll pick it up real quick. And of course the rest of this is pretty much redundant. We're just going to go back, remask this area. Once you really see how to do one, and obviously roundels or any kind of trim, there's going to be a lot of redundant. You know, if that tape starts coming up, you have a lot of choices. You can thin the tape. You can do this, or what you can do also is, as soon as you lay the tape down, put that coat of clear on. That seems to help also seal it. By putting the tape on right away, it helps any small curve. It helps the tape maintain that, because the tape wants to go back and expand. As soon as you get a tight curve on, it's a good idea to do the back masking. You can use over and over again. Let me get over on this side. When you have only small areas, you obviously don't have to mask the whole plane off. So you can bring the two pieces of foil off, just like you're baking a turkey. Not baking a windy, baking a turkey. What do you mean it's the same thing? Who said that out there? Anyway, this will just kind of save you on tape and labor. Because again, once you get comfortable using foil, I doubt that anybody, I didn't anyway, go back to using newspaper and using up all my Playboy magazines and stuff. It was terrible, and then Karen wouldn't buy me any more. On the side of the fuselage, I'm going to have what amounts to be 5 invasion stripes, and I want to position the roundel so it doesn't overlap into any of the two surrounding stripes. It'll then comprise the two middle stripes, not the middle, the two off to the right side. But what I need to do is lay out the stripes, even though they're not there yet, then position the roundel, position the white, and then position the red, so that in effect I'm just going to be painting a red dot right in the middle of the white border. What I need to do is, I need this stripe, so I'll lay this out with 1/8 inch tape so I can position this. And I need to get it the same distance from the top and the bottom. And when I'm all done, I need to lay this piece out, lay this out, and then locate my center. All I'm going to really be doing is locating that dot. A sheet, I have all 5 of these stripes laid out. And what I did, I made up a piece in a different color paper, so I can cut these actually out and tape them in position, and that'll leave that border for the outline it around Dell. It'll be a lot easier to lay it out if I have this blocked out. And a lot of times what you want to do is you want to get trim so it's even on both wings, even looking from the front to back. If you make little paper patterns, which is the whole point of this whole video, you wind up, it's a lot easier to get it right. Now it gives me a real good chance of getting that roundel right where I want it to be. You have all these little paper patterns made up. It seems like you're playing paper dolls here for a while. But once you have all of these little patterns, what they allow you to do is make repetitive, duplicatable images from wingtip to wingtip, fuselage side to fuselage side. It really does pay to make the patterns up accurately. Now the way I can get this so that when you look from the top, obviously this is a good thing, is put a center line. In this case it's 1/8" tape. And when I spin this around, I can use this as my reference. That's how far from the top it is, and it's in the middle and the center of the invasion stripe. So some of this layout stuff, and of course I'll just keep going and get that little dot. All I need this for is to get that little dot. Now it's a question, I have my little center masked out. I need to flip this completely over, repeat the same thing, and this will be ready to mask off. The biggest challenge will be, I have the white or the red is going to be all masked off. It's going to be difficult, I know, to try to get these teeth equal. So what I decided to do is cut each tooth out of a separate piece of tape so I could maneuver him around, because he looks pretty mean. I mean, he doesn't look mean. If he looks like a worm or something, it's not going to work. This has to look mean, so. And that's why I can maneuver the teeth. You see these two teeth here just about touch, and then they don't touch. I can kind of keep this right by the side while I mask this off. And getting the eye right, too, is an important part of this. I guess there's no real easy way to do this other than to just make up a bunch of teeth. And by laying each one in, having a nice Excel cutting pad helps a lot here, too. You don't wear out 1,000 blades doing this. It's inevitable. You're going to move the teeth 1,000 times before you get the look that you want. Well, we're ready to paint the red. I hope this is going to look like, well, you never really know what you think the paint looks anyway. Okay, we come back in the morning, we'll pull all that tape and tinfoil off and see how the red came out. This is Madrid red, by the way, Madrid red. Well, I always like to not take a chance and not pull the tape back before. Really, in an ideal world, 24 hours is about perfect for any kind of lacquer. I'm not going to work on a model tonight, but I do want to get the tape off. See, this is the whole point. I have a couple of days of family stuff to do, and I don't want to let this tape sit on over the weekend for the next 3 days. So I like to just get it off. Now, there'll be a little overspray parts. I can take some Gorhams and a Q-tip. There's always little spots, even no matter how careful you are, you always get these little spots. Now, a couple of little things worth mentioning. A lot of times you get a little bit of that, like a black residue from the aluminum. Usually what will take it right off If some M600 doesn't, certainly a little bit of Gorham's will. And then you want to clean the residue of the Gorham's with some M600. Now, I don't know, for the first coat, working on that mouth, obviously the next step is to mask out the other teeth, and it gets pretty complex. But anyway, we got the first part of it on there. Everything seemed to pull up pretty nice, and I want to let this sit over the weekend, and we'll come back and work on this Monday. Now today I want to mask off, and I want to try to do this all in one swoop. The invasion stripes, except for the roundel and the one letter that's going to sit in an invasion stripe, and the top part of the shark mouth. And see if I can get that all done in one day. It is 5 degrees outside, so I'm not in any rush to get outside and paint. I'll spend the whole day masking this off. It's freezing. And now you can figure out, and of course, every plane is going to be different depending on the paintwork, that by having the patterns, now it's a relatively simple thing. I need to lay out where the roundel is. I need to lay out where the stripes are going to sit. And then check, and then I have the same old pattern I used before to lay out where each one of the stripes will be. Do it with accurate little pattern. This is so much easier. Just imagine the alternative of having to mask it all off. You take the tape off and something's not exactly where you want it. So for me anyway, and the way I have evolved this system that I use, is always doing it with paper first, and it just works out real well. Now the masking part of this is going to take an hour, 2 hours, you don't know, but then the back masking. But if I can get all the black done in one shoot, it means I only have to change the paint in the gun once, and that's a saving, just a saving in time, and obviously the black is going to cover over anything. It doesn't even matter what's underneath, but in this case, going black over white, instant. Kind of redundant. There's not much point in repeating this over and over. I just need to leave the black stripes exposed, make sure that they're both equal, and make sure everything is sealed up around the edge. I like to use the 3M tape if the lines are going to be totally straight, and the regular masking tape, the tan stuff, for when I'm going to be doing curves. But either way, I like to seal the edge, of course. And the same thing, you can buy this in eighth, quarter, all kind of different widths. You really should rub it up on a flannel shirt before you put it on the paint. It is kind of sticky. And because I've located my little red center, I'm able to lay out, and of course this is one thing I wanted to show. What I'm able to do now, I have two choices. I can take another pattern and make it 1/8 of an inch less on one side. In this case, what I did though, I just laid out a piece of tape around it, then peeled the template off and put the tape right where this would be. So it's just one way of doing things. Now what I did, I'm almost running out of 1/8 inch tape. So I'm going to show another technique. It just gives me an opportunity to show another technique. But what I want to do is my stripe pattern, because I'm going to be laying these out minus the tape, I want to trim the distance of the tape off of one side and then mark it. Otherwise what I would have to do is lay out a piece of tape, take the template off, put that piece of tape on. It would just require extra tape, and by trimming the pattern back, it allows me to do this in one taping. So I just need to tape these in place, and they'll already be minus the thickness of the tape, so I can tape right along the edge of them. Makes it real easy. Any template that I make minus the tape, I always mark it nice and clear. And what this allows me to do now is just tack this on with any amount of tape. In fact, what I'm going to do is just take an extra little piece here to make sure this is straight. But I know now that this is a minus, this little template is on the minus side, I need to get what's left of. See, this is poor planning. I'm down to my end of my tape, and I'm going to have to start cutting tape. But it'll open the opportunity up for me to show another way of doing this. A lot of people don't like to use 1/8 inch tape. They like to cut their own custom width. And in the case of thin roundels, you can make it, a little more like a 1/16. It's nice. But anyway, this is beside the point right now, is I just want to lay this on. I know I'm minus the tape, so that lays out the edge of my black stripe. Now I can start working up toward the other end. course, it doesn't matter if you're upside down or right side up here. Now, I know for years what I used to do is I used to just do all this freehand and try to make them equal, and like those arrowheads that are on a lot of the planes, those axe handles or whatever you call them. And I'd never get it right. It's just impossible without the little at least for me anyway. Now, of course, when I'm done, as it goes around the fuselage, what I do is I take this off and check at every station, because it's really difficult to get a round stripe to go around a conical shaped body. It isn't exactly what you think it is. As it goes around the bottom, it wants to bow in a little bit. Now, here's where having this little template to line everything up really helps. Because if these stripes are off even just a little bit, boy, you can spot it right away. Now, you think this would be kind of easy, but when you take the straight edge and line it up, it really takes a lot of time to get these stripes parallel. Really is a lot more work than you really think in the very beginning it is. Now, I want to raft the tape. A lot of times it's easier to pinch the tape at the trailing edge. If you tend to pull paint, this is where it'll always happen, right at the trailing edge. And obviously you want to make sure that the black stripes then transpose into black and the white stripes into white stripes. What I wanted to show is, because in all my brilliance I've run out of 1/8" tape, and I need some very thin pieces. One of the ways you can do this, you can do it on a piece of glass, of course, or you can do it over an XL pad. But either way, you'll get a relatively nice cut, and it doesn't matter which end of the tape you use. In fact, it doesn't matter if it's, unless you're going to use it as an 1/8" stripe, it doesn't even matter. And again, the advantage of doing it this way, and this is really a great tip, is when you're doing very small, tiny curves, even an 1/8" tape can pull up. This way you can make unlimited amounts of thicknesses. And obviously one of the things is where the tape is a lot cheaper than you can use either end of it. Tape is going to be very helpful in laying out the lettering. So what I'm going to do is I got to cut nice little insert holes here, tape these letters in place, and it's real handy to be able to go around it with nice thin tape, otherwise it all gets bunched up in the corners. Now, because in the black stripe this is going to remain white, what I want to do is I can trace the thickness, and it's roughly 3/8, but I'll measure it with the letter itself. I can make this, and I can cut this tape, and I can actually do the letter right with a piece of tape. I don't even need to lay it out. And see, what this allows you to do is use any thickness of tape for your trim work. Now see, by having some parallel lines to work with, I can raise and lower this until I see where it looks the most scale. And when I'm totally satisfied with it, then I'm just going to mask off the M. Now, anybody considering any kind of invasion stripes, they look real easy, and when you're all done you say, oh my god, that took a lot of time. It looks like you just lay out tape and paint them. It's anything but that. And to get the lettering equal so it falls within the stripe, the roundels scale, and the rivet lines, of course, which will be in the inking part of the video, that's really a lot more difficult than it looks at the first shot. See what happens, lettering like this, like the Red Baron lettering, yeah, well, it's even straighter lettering. It looks difficult, so you're prepared for it, but then you think, oh, just lay out the stripes, and instead of it being a 5-minute job, it really does take a long time. Now when I mask that off, that'll be a black stripe, and that M will come out. When I take the tape off, that'll leave the letter white. I won't have an extra coat of paint there. masking these little tiny areas out, it really is nice to have the ability to strip tape any dimension that you want. The last part of this now is going to be to just lay out the teeth in white on the shark mouth, and we'll be ready to backmask it. The real fun part is the tinfoil. Now, we only need the backmask off. We don't have any out at the wingtips, maybe a foot out into the wing, up around the black part of the mouth, and the back part of the fuse. But if in doubt, always mask a little further than you have to. It's just, as opposed to sanding off the little overspray, it really is cheap insurance. Anyway, I want to get this backmask, get the black shot before it gets dark here. Is making up a strip to do the invasion stripes, and this is part of the fun, is inventing little ways of making making little things that you need to have go as smoothly as possible. Yeah, I sealed everything up on the edge with a thin coat of clear with a tiny 1/8" brush. Now we get this, I haven't been outside all day because it's about 5 degrees out there. It's going to be murder to get this sprayed. Well, it's good to be out in the cold. Okay, as always, we'll let this dry overnight, come back to it tomorrow, see what we can get the tape to come off nice and clean. I'm just looking it over if there's any spots I missed. I always like to look over. Kind of looking forward to seeing what that mouth is going to start to look like once we get, well, you never really know. This is the first time we've done one. We really don't have a way of predicting whether it's going to be really nice or just okay. Okay, we'll work on this tomorrow. This morning, this has been sitting by the heating vent all night. And then notice what I'm doing. Pulling the tape straight back and pull it nice and slow. Now, John Brodak gave me a great tip. If you have a tendency to pull some paint up, one of the things you can do is hit it with a hairdryer. Another thing you can do is when you're going to do this part, leave the airplane up by the heating vent. Let it get nice and warm. It seems like when the tape gets warm, it comes off a lot easier than when it's cold. And never, never, never take this outside into a cold, now it's 5 degrees out there today, take it out into a cold environment and then try taking the tape off. Card the edge of it. See, the edges of the card wear out. Reason enough to have more than one credit card. Shave the edge, wipe it with M600 and go on to the next line. Now we'll be ready to set up and tape off all the blue today. The blue in the roundels is the only part of the blue. We'll try to get that done today. We're trying to do one color a day. That's the plan here. Now, no matter how careful I am, I always get these little spots. Now I know I've put this on the tape already, but there's an important part. You're always tempted to take sandpaper or something and get these little edges cleaned up where the overspray is. If you do that, you really run the risk that when you put the clear on, you've made a sanding scratch that can then go down in there and open up like a little river of something that has to be fixed. A much better choice is just take the gorms, and in here I have a couple little spots. Any little spots left over from the aluminum, by the way. Try to always clean this up. Now, as soon as this is done, I try to clean it up as I go along. As soon as I'm done, I take a rag with M600 degreaser and get this all degreased, carded down, all as I'm going along. A lot of people just let it go, and then you're building up all these fish eyes and contamination and everything. You should do this on an ongoing basis.
My boy, where you ought to believe, I'll ride the wind through my scream and yell at your God. Walk along, come back to me. Let the top of the devil has come back to me. You hear on let you hear, this is where.
Now while I was masking this off, I tried to save a step. I wanted to do the black outline around the mouth with a brush. So of course one of the things is, while I'm doing this, that can be drying, just save a step. This gets pretty redundant. Everybody, you start working with this and you realize it goes a lot faster than you originally thought it did. But it's starting to shape up, little by little by little here. We'll be ready to shoot the blue in an hour or so. Okay, we're ready to spray the blue. And you get so sick of looking at aluminum foil. I go to bed at night seeing aluminum foil. Anyway, kind of happy with the way the shark mouth is coming out, and of course, we'll be fine-tuning that as we go along. Roundels. Just a question of hoping we get some spray weather out there today. Anyway, this insignia blue is a really good match for the blue on the Spitfire posters.
I thought you just had your eye on your books. And you have your eye on the rabbi's son. Well, why not?
Looks like that blue is drying up beautifully. All right, we'll work on this tomorrow. We're finding out about all the Brodak dope. I mean, firsthand, we're finding it out. Virtually every color, it even covers on your hand one coat. One coat coverage, as long as you're going over nice silver. One coat, no problem at all. We haven't hit a color yet that doesn't cover. And little by little, it's starting to really look like the paint job that we have in mind. We got the canopies today from Midgley. Now, normally, because we had made a special canopy for the plane, a modification to the original one, normally what I would have done is, and very simple, is I would have had this all done, and after painting the yellow today, I would have painted all of the paint, backmasked the stripes and the roundels, and painted the plane. Problem is we're going to take a little bit of a gap in between here. After painting the yellow, we're going to put this aside and just do the canopy work. So kind of a little bit out of sequence, but normally, obviously this would be not a normal thing, but because we made that special canopy, and it really is, in my eyes, a world-class part. So if you lay out the tape the way I showed originally, and I'm not going to show it over and over again, what happens, you're able to pull a backmasking off in one piece like this. And obviously, no matter what trim job you have in mind, you should think about how you want to backmask it. This way works very well for us. But once you know the basics, by the way, the thing I really like is the colors. This is the colors right out of the Brodak cans. Really are an exact match for the Spitfire. I don't know if that's on purpose or what, but did a nice job of matching the colors to the roundels. Yeah, I really like the way the roundels came out on this. These actually, I like them a lot better than the ones on the original Spitfire. was just looking through some of my old videos with some of the old shark teeth on some of the other models. And there's been shark teeth on just about P38s, B25s, there's a P40. There's so many variations of the shark teeth mode. That's why it's nice to have all this stuff on video. You can get ideas. Or if you have an idea, you can go back and confirm that that's what you really want to do. And this shark mouth has taken, well, every part of this plane has taken about 3 times the normal amount of time to do, but you have to decide, obviously you do it for yourself, you have to decide what it is you really want to do. In this case, this is kind of my first time into the shark teeth, whatever, so I haven't really come up with a bulletproof way of doing this yet. It's just a lot of work. Another nice theme, the checkerboards on the cowl. I can't wait to see Banjak's playing. Banjak is doing that, I'm sure, something. In fact, I think the P51 that Banjak's doing has a shark mouth on it. I'm not sure. I guess we're going to find out. Shark mouth on a B25. That was in one of the Mel Gibson movies, by the way. That's the real prototype to that plane they used. One of the B-25s that's still flying. Just some of the variations on trim on these planes. The books are so helpful. B-70, a B-52, it's phone time.
Hard to land as the yielded brine.
Now we'll see how we like this as this paint job evolves. Now in today's mail we got a couple of pictures. These originally went to Bob Martens. He reviewed them. Of course, this is Joe Adamusco's new Spitfire, late model rudder, Global Canopy version, showing some of the detailing, and he really has done some job on it, as he always does. I shouldn't say this. Every job is like this he does. Look at the detailing, the radiators, the gear, and again, he always raises the bar, I shouldn't say it. Kind of a Reno Air Race fantasy version he calls Super Marine. And as a compliment into the blue, the Photo Recon version, his original one, adds a nice little chapter to our Spitfire story. Good things. One of the things John Brodak has available is a video of the last 5 or 6 Nats, the appearance judging, so you can get ideas for your paint jobs. I mean, one of the things I need is all these videos and books that I constantly look at them, but a lot of people don't have it. You can get it all in one video, and that video is available right from John. All right, we're going to lay out the yellow on the roundels, lettering on the side, and hope that we can get this sprayed today, and then hopefully that'll be it for the day. Next thing I want to, because I have invasion stripes, this yellow bar goes up to the invasion stripes on a prototype and mask off the little gun squares, which I could have painted when I did the red. I really dropped the ball here. But I can just wait and have these masked off ahead of time. What I really want to do is get all the yellow in. And right now, getting that bar, I'll just leave teeth here so that the red will be equal with it. On some of the models, the yellow goes right out to the tip. Some of them have combinations of machine guns and cannons. And some of the models don't have a yellow band at all. What it is, this was like a red duct tape that they put over the machine guns until they fired them, and then it just shot through the tape. Up a little template for what will be these little gun tape out areas. And again, I could have painted them red ahead of time. Yeah, you see, you dropped the football, eh? Just got to admit you do it. Oh, and then this will be my yellow, yellow, and yellow. When I shoot this yellow, I'll have this back masked also. So it really won't be the end of the world, I hope. I hope it'll be good. So every time you lose time like this, it's a problem. Well, whenever I want to work on the side of the fuse, of course there's a lot of ways. I don't want to say they make these real nice things at Byron Barker, and he actually gave me one. I used it, but the problem is, it works real well, except see, I don't have enough room between here. When I rotate the plane, I bang into the desks and stuff, and I really can't. I don't have any open space in the shop big enough. But if you have open space, that Byron Barker thing is fantastic. I just use this. I duct tape some blankets so that I can't bang the leading edge on a table. Get an old stool. I used to have one with the piece cut out, but I gave it to Ken for his shop. And this kind of rests there now in a relatively safe way. And now I can work comfortably. I got to lay out this part of the trim. But having a little way, this is a great tip no matter what you do. Having a way you can confine the plane in this dimension, you need to do. And of course, for all the inking and trimming, we want to work in this dimension. I don't want to work sideways on my knees. Now it's nice that we have, when we paint these in with yellow, the reason I blacked this out, I didn't want to go yellow over black. I'm starting to build up many layers of paint there. And probably what happened on the Seaflyer was I couldn't get this color to really match, and it kind of looked hokey, so I had to go back over and over and over again. So learning my lesson, I backmasked this out. So now once I get these letters all backmasked out, then I'll lay a piece of tinfoil over here, oops, rub it, and then trace out all the parts, and I should be able to mask this with one piece of tinfoil when I'm done. Okay, we're ready for the yellow. And we're going to be using Cub Yellow for this, which is a real good. I'm really impressed with how close these colors match the colors that I'm really trying to replicate. Okay, believe it or not, we're down to being ready to paint the plane. Tomorrow morning we'll come down, pull this tinfoil off. Actually, we'll probably work on a canopy first. That'll take a couple of days, but then we're going to be back. Pull all this tape off, make sure all the edges are nice and clean. Yellow covered beautifully, by the way. If you're going to paint silver underneath, you'll find out you get away with the worst, in the worst of all worlds, 2 coats, and almost always 1 coat. Well, one thing about the Brodak yellow, it is really a bright yellow. Wow. I've said this earlier on in the tape, as careful as I am, I guess as careful as everybody is, there's always little spots, and I see here's one of them. It always seems like these bad spots come out on the top of the outboard wing for some reason. Never see this stuff happen on the bottom. But this is a good time for me to do this, because I want to get a bunch of little baby food type jars. Actually, it can be any kind of jars. You can actually use the cans the paint comes in, but I want to make myself up in one confined area, a touch-up kit, so that I can do this on an ongoing basis. I can go around, I can say there's a little spot there, a little spot here. If you do it on an ongoing basis and don't wait to the end, it just seems like it's a lot easier to me. Now maybe it's just the way I am, or I like to be as far along on this as I can at any given time, because every night when I'm done, I kind of look over the plane and I say, gee, how do I like that? Do I like it? I should have been a dancer. Anyway, I've carted off all the edges, and now I can pick out the little spots. In fact, I'm going to make up that little touch-up kit next. And there's no money involved in this. A little box. I want a little baby food jar, a little glass jar, and a lid for every color that I'm going to have on a plane. And have it right by the workbench with a little jar of thinner to clean the brush in. You can use one brush and just do it over and over. I find out that if you no matter how you do this paint comes out of the same can because there is a little color variation in paint. So as you do, the next color on this will be the camo. I'll make a little jar of camo. We already have white and black, but to have a little touch-up with the paint that actually is on a plane, it means in the future even, when I'm all done with the plane, this will get boxed up and I'll put a little label on it, I-beam touch-up paint, so that I'll always have a little bit of paint of all the colors that I want to use on this plane. It may sound like this is kind of a, not that important of a thing. Believe me, it is important. Shake the can up real well before you pour your touch-up paint. Always a good tip. And now you know that this exact color, you don't know that in the future, paint will be a little aged by the sun or whatever. That's a little bit too much. I don't want to have that much, and I'll tell you why in 1 second. I'll show you the reason what I like to do. And this is a good little tip. If you leave just a little bit of paint in there, what happens, and you dunk the brush, and the brush, it doesn't go down into the wood part of the brush. And you'll just, when you pull it out, it's a little too deep still. Let me show this, because this is really a good trick. A lot of people that have been in the shop look at this, and they can't understand why I take a brush out, and it's got just the right amount of paint on it all the time. Well, I put a little bit too much in here. It's even still too much. And if you have extra brushes, just pick up a brush for each one. And it's so handy to have this little kit. When this has all the colors in it, I'll be ready to just, on a minute's notice, I'm walking around a plane doing something. Oh, there's a little spot. Reach in, touch it up. Then when you get to doing the clear and the ink lines and everything else, you don't have 100 little things all crooked and crazy on it. And every time you look at the plane, you'll see different things that need to be touched up. One of the important things, I don't know if I emphasized it enough, is make sure you stir the paint. Otherwise the color changes just a little bit if the pigment sinks to the bottom, and you want those touch-up areas to be perfect. Now having that little touch-up kit, that'll be very handy every time I work in a plane. Take the lids off. That's ready to go. I find out everywhere I go, there's always people that tell me, oh, I never had that problem, and I don't know. This touch-up thing, if that little jar is sitting right next to you at all times, you'll have a tendency to look around. Any little areas need to be touched up, you take care of them all right as you see them. Get a little paper template for this gun port. I'm trying to keep these into a relatively scale size. And as I confessed before, I just forgot to do these when I did the red. To save myself a little work. No, we'll come back and work on this tomorrow. Let that dry overnight. See if it needs a second coat. This is one of the most difficult parts of this. None of the Brodak colors really exactly match the dark green, so what I've done is taken the dark green, the bright green, and add a little bit of red to get this green color, which I'm sneaking up on having it. It's pretty close right now. A little bit of red added to the green comes out with a real close match to the camo. Now, all I can tell you about mixing colors is have fun. If you try to match small amounts, and obviously I'll try to run a test. I've got the red. I read red and black to make the brown. I'm trying to get a match for the book. I really haven't decided. I want to make 2 or 3 combinations up here. Do a little test. And the brown is just definitely way too dark here. It's always good to mix real small amounts and keep track of how much you're adding. Because within this color range, you really have plenty of choices. Now that's just a little bit too drastic of a color change. Mixing up a lot of combinations, I can see I just need a little bit of blue and polar gray, and the green I have is real close. So with these colors mixed, now we have a couple of choices. What I'll do is I'm just doing a little test. Once I get the color exactly the way I want it, the 3 colors being the underside, the light blue, and the top, of course, I want to run a little test before I do anything with the real plane. Okay, today I pulled off the tape. Got my little gun ports all laid out. Now what we're going to be doing with this video, we're going to take a break from this video and on a separate tape, because these are things that will just fill out the video, and I want to keep all the trim on one video for the Brodak dope. Off camera and on a separate video that's available from John Brodak, we're going to be doing a canopy, full detail, full cockpit detail, and we're going to be picking this up probably in a week or so with what I hope is going to be the final camo job. We were mixing some colors last night. It's starting to really look like an airplane. This is the point at which, for me anyway, it starts to really get to be fun. But we'll see you in a week or 2. Here we are a little more than a week later. What I'm doing is backmasking all the trim. The canopy is on a separate video for anybody that's interested, all the detailing, all the dials and gauges and who knows what. And what I'm doing, I'm in the middle of backmasking and painting a coat of clear around all the edges, trying to get this ready. Tomorrow is shaping up to be a day that I may be able to get this sprayed, so I'd like to get as much of this done tonight. Try to get this ready so tomorrow I can spray all the camo. Oh, I just wanted to mention, because we have some really sharp edge, razor edge fillets, and I wanted that as part of the attraction of the model to be very razor edge. What I found, and this has worked really well in a lot of things, is this, and this is basically hard rubber. In the past, when I've tried to make tools this shape out of pine or hardwood, it just doesn't work out as well. Now let me just show this. This is one of the tricks that I've found for getting these fillets really nice. And in the past, I've used pieces of wood and stuff that I really wasn't happy with. But this lets me get right into the corner. It lets me lay down and then get it up, down and up, and get that angle just perfect. Now what I'm going to do tonight is spray the last coat of silver over the canopy. Let this dry overnight. Tomorrow we're expecting snow, I guess. But anyway, since Karen won't be here all day tomorrow, even if we have to, we can paint some of this in a house or out by the furnace, which will be the most unusual of situations. Now what I also found is, because of the points, this is the handiest tool I've found in a long time. Boy, that Brodak primer does one super job. Again, there's a lot of good shapes, but this is one of the best ones I've found. Okay, this morning what I want to do, even though I've put one thin stripe of clear around all the tape edges, I want to go back and add one extra coat of clear, because these are the edges that are going to show in the final coat of paint. Now I've already mixed up the green, the camo colors, and the light blue. The light blue that's going to go on the bottom is a standard Brodak color. So what I'm going to do, after I get all the edges sealed off today, this is the rarest of days. Karen will be gone virtually for the whole day at a business meeting, so it's going to allow me to paint in the house instead of out in the garage. And that's lucky because it was about 5 below zero out there this morning when I went out there to get the paper. Anyway, we are ready. The day has come. The taping is done. Now what I want to do is a little paint test, get my guns all set up so I have all the colors that I'm going to use in individual guns. Make sure all these tape edges are down. And in a matter of maybe a half an hour or so, we'll be ready to start actually spraying this, and I'll actually be able to get some of it on video. Now, real Spitfires, of course, come in many, many different color combinations. Typically, the earlier ones were brown and green as they flew over land, but as the battle progressed over Europe, they went to green, basically dark green and gray, to simulate the difference in terrain, this being the earliest one. Now, there's two different kinds of camouflage, and if you're doing a warbird, which obviously some people are, one of the things to remember is there's hard camo where the edges are hard, and there's soft camo where I assume they just went by with a spray gun and brushed the edges. And in this case, we're going to be doing a soft camouflage edge. The first Spitfire was a hard edge. Second, the Seafire was a soft edge. This one, I kind of like the soft edge one better. Now, it's pretty much these colors that we're going to try to simulate. And these are soft edge camos. There's not a razor sharp edge. Similarly, some of the later model ones, they kept the same basic look, and I leave these books out so that when I'm doing this I have to do it all freehand, of course. Some of the truly early ones had the dark brown and green, then they went to the green and gray, and of course there's every variation of desert camo. Some of the ones Joe Adamusco looked at right up to the late model ones that were really exotic. So you really have plenty of choices of color, and in this case the colors I've mixed, and I've done it off camera, taken a lot of time to try to get the colors the way I wanted them. Again, there's a lot of differences, and there's almost an endless variety of colors, this being the soft camo color, soft edges, but no matter what, I want to try to simulate some of that the exact way that goes on. Some of the darker greens, and I'm sure they didn't, do these color paint jobs with, with real intricate artwork. They were looking to just camouflage the plane and make it disappear. Some of the greens are really green, some of the blues are really blue, but you really have, when you have books with all of these combinations, it's almost difficult to make a decision which one you like. I just think the soft camo ones just look a little more realistic. Obviously, one of the things, because we're going to be ready to actually put paint on this within a half an hour, is to go down. And another thing, if this was an ideal world, I would want to put the tape on and go right out and paint. What I did, I put this tape on last night, and that's why I'm putting this extra edge of clear on now and running each tape edge down, because this has sat overnight. And again, I have to work around some constraints here. One of them is you usually can't paint in the house, but when I do get a day, I really like to take full advantage of it. And that little second coat of clear, you think all these little details won't matter, nobody will see that, yeah, you can get away with that. Yeah. When you put the extra little time in, I find it, in the long run, you're looking at this thing for 10 years, and you really, hopefully even longer, again, I've said that before. Hopefully, all of this little detailing will pay off. All the little details in the canopy. And for the people that have seen that Canopy video, I hope you enjoyed. Boy, that was a real couple of weeks of hard work. Anyway, the coat of clear that you put on here is about 60% thinner. You want it to be thin so it goes in and melts that paint edge down. And if there is any gap under the tape, it'll go under the tape. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this over, put the plane together, put the flaps and elevators on, because again, when you shoot camo, you have to do it all freehand. I'm going to assemble the whole plane, turn it over, and do the light blue color first. And the light blue color is just a standard Brodak color. Now I mix up the three colors that I'm going to be doing this, and what I'm trying to do is get a nice blend here. And what I keep doing is just adding a little more thinner, a little more thinner, a little more thinner, until all of a sudden that edge will just melt right in. Now I've got the gray okay. It started out being way too thick. Just adding thinner, I've got to where I'm happy with that. Now I'm working on the green. Just adding thinner, adding thinner. I like to always, the bottom of a turkey pan, a thinner can, anything, a light bulb is good. But I want to get all the paint that it blends and feather edges in real nice. I try to use about 20 pounds of pressure and get the paint nice and thin to get a nice even camo job. Now, as I always do, I always paint the little parts. I got the little hatch in the back and the tip weight box just to see if I got good, if I have decent flow out. That's real nice flow out at about 25 psi, 60% thinner. I have all three of the guns ready at the same time, so I'm ready to, and obviously I'm going to work on the bottom first, let that dry, and then flip it over. Now obviously if I was painting anywhere in confined areas I'd wear a mask, except when I try to do that and shoot video, you know, I sound like Mumbles. Well, maybe I sound like Mumbles without the mask too. But you should have a mask on anytime you're using chemicals, that's for sure. Now it's easy. In this case, I want to divide up the plane into little quadrants. I want to spray this way toward the edge of that, the trailing edge, so I don't have to tape that off. And of course, when I do the top, I'll try to spray from that direction so that I don't have to mask the back edge off. In this case, I have this edge masked off, so I like to just go right up to it, go around the roundels. You can do one section of this at a time, and where the edge, anywhere that there's no tape, it'll be a soft edge. Notice I'm trying to get on the thinnest coat possible. Trying not to put even one drop extra of pigmented paint. Brodak dope has just about what I feel is the right amount of pigment, a good balance, so you really don't have to add pigment. Now even with all the fans in here, I can only do one section of this at a time. Then I have to take a break and let the cellar air out. But boy, considering it's about 5 degrees outside, it's definitely the lesser of two evils. The paint really glosses up really nice. What I do is I let one section dry, let the cellar air out, then I'll go do the other section, and then probably the fuselage and bottom, then maybe in 4 sections, each individual. I took the rudder off just to keep it from dropping on the floor. But to do this amount of the plane, what I needed was exactly 1 4-ounce jar and about 6 ounces of thinner. So you can pretty much figure how much it would take. This is probably 1/4 of the plane. All right, we're going to let this dry. That's the next step. Again, this is where you have to really get the fog pattern down, or else you don't get those nice blended edges. I don't want to shoot from the edge.
towards the tip.
Again, by just doing one section at a time, letting the cell air out in between sections, you can see what nice gloss this dries up with. I'm just trying to lay out, and when you get up here, it's good, just hold a piece of IBM cord so you don't get it blows down onto the board. Part here is I want to get the green on the tail. I've got to watch that I don't blow the rudder off. The rudder's just hanging on with those little half-A hinges. As soon as this green kind of dries up, we're ready to put on the gray camo.
Hard part up here because I don't want this stuff to blow off. I'm just really trying to get the fog lines just right, more than anything else here.
Okay, the last thing, and this is a real good tip for anybody that is anticipating doing some camouflage work or any kind of work where you're doing a soft blend. One of the things I do is, as soon as everything is tacky dry, I go over the whole area except for where the trim is. All the areas that have the soft edge, that whole area with a coat of Brodak clear. Now the reason for that, think about this for a minute, that's just dust. Those blends, they're just dust. So I want those blends to be as concealed as I can while I'm inking and doing all the detail work on this. So what I did, one coat, and believe me, one coat really shines this right up. You can see we've even got enough penetration. We're softening up the silk span. Now the hardest area on the whole plane, the most pain in the neck of all, is getting back by the rudder here, because every time you spray something, you're hitting something you don't want to really spray. But anyway, this coat of clear is going to dry up. I'm going to let this sit 24 hours before I pull the tape up, and then get back to this, hopefully, I don't know if tomorrow we're going to have any real business things to do at the shop, but certainly 24 hours, keep it nice and warm. And this was a long day. This was a day of, I don't know, what kind of days. You breathe a lot of dope fumes anyway. Keep the fans going at all times. Okay, we'll come back to this tomorrow. Now, one of the things I look for whenever I come by, this is all dried up a day and it's ready to take the tin foil and the masking tape off, is that if I'm missing any edges, and of course there's always spots where you get a little overspray or something you want to touch up, something you want to change. Usually there's some spots along the tape line. If you look it over, because before you pull a tape off, really important to be able to do these touch-ups while you have all this back masked. In this case it looks pretty decent, and it's these fog lines that are very difficult. Whether you do this on a traditional finish or on a, like a camo job, getting these lines to just fog and fade in. And Midgley did a beautiful job on one of his planes. Anyway, I'm getting ready here. As soon as I get a minute, I'm going to pull all this tape off, put the whole plane together and look for any other spots, even after the tape is up, any uneven tape lines or anything.
Keep on living. Keep on caring what's going to happen.
This is one area where you get the blends from the blue. It's difficult, and what I do, I go along the whole trailing edge with a brush right along here to get the edges even. You can see where the blue, and it would go right through the fillet on one side where it ends back here, and it actually, half of this is light blue, and it's easy to do that, just run a brush down it. And most of all to have those nice blends. Because once that's all buffed out, those blends, that makes up the majority of what really is outstanding about the plane, how it looks from, when you just walk into a room and there it is, it kind of jumps out at you. Anyway, this looks like, I don't know, the color mixing and the matching, this looks about as close to being what was in my mind's eye as anything I've ever done. I'm going to start getting this, get as much of this pulled off as I can. The trick here is to pull the tape back. I like to let any dope or lacquer sit 24 hours. Pull the tape back nice and slow. The top tape, it really doesn't matter. It's the edge tape where we put that double edging. And this is where it takes a little patience. This is where even I get impatient because I want to see how the plane's going to look. Oh yeah, that's going to be a nice edge. See how nice this cuts that edge right down? Now at this point, every time I get through with this, I want to have the edge totally carted off. Just remember, this edge has a coat of clear coming out over the little spot where it's fogged. Now, some of these edges right here, where there's a rib, Mike ran into the same problem. You just gotta chintz away at it.
Getting to lighting the night. When I'm hungry, I'm brave. Things I'm learning about you.
Now this is one of the steps a lot of people leave out, and you really have to pay later on. As I'm pulling up this tape, any little spot that I find, even the smallest spot, and I do it on an ongoing basis, where I don't have a nice neat tape line, and there's always some, no matter how carefully I seal everything up, I always get, here's one right here, some little spots that don't knock down with the card. And what I do, I get my little touch-up kit out, and as I'm going along, touch up every spot that I run into like that. And there's always having that little touch-up kit handy. If you have to go open up a can and dig out a brush, you'll tend to let these things go. If you have that little touch-up kit handy, it's just so easy. You just go right out. As each time you take a piece of trim up, do the touch-up. Now even here, there's some edges I need to get a little bit of a touch-up on. Now every once in a while you can get the little overspray off with some M600, but see how it takes the paint up? So I don't want to soak it, then I want to get that touch-up kit out. This will take some of it out, and anything it won't get out, I get out with the touch-up kit. Here's a spot over here too I have to get out. This is a step you don't want to skimp on. Always important to pull the tape straight back. Always little overspray areas like this, and I find little gorums on a Q-tip is one good way of getting them up. And just takes a little time and patience to get it off. But if you do this on an ongoing basis, you never wind up at the end with all this like an overwhelming job. You just keep working at this. And even if we have to go through, if we do go through, see I'm rotating the Q-tip. Even if you go through, you can get the, just reach over and get the touch-up brush. Try not to bear down too hard, just work it, here it goes, it's getting ready to go. Like a little magic trick here. This is what really helps me, is having this ongoing touch-up thing going with the grooms. When these jaws are sitting out here and you can just do this on a moment's notice, just makes the whole job a lot easier. One of the little final touches I like to have is that these paint lines go through the little cowling lines.